All right. Hello. Welcome to Indieheads podcast with three other people who were mostly not in the previous episode, I believe. Anybody want to take it away here and tell us what we're talking about today?
Ooh, today we are talking about a record that ranked in our top 10 of the decade, and I think ranked in all of our personal top 10s as well. The classic "Soft Sounds from Another Planet" by Japanese Breakfast. And should we go around and introduce ourselves as well? Rose, you just kicked it off. I'm Lily, and who else do we have?
Oh, just me, Corinne. Hi.
Woo!
Just
All
Corinne.
right.
Yeah, we're all
Just
in
Corinne.
it. We're all amped, ready to talk. I believe this is maybe one of the first all gals episodes of the podcast.
Yeah.
If I'm not mistaken. So that's very fun
And
and
for
very
ladies out
fitting
there.
because this is an album about being a woman and how that's a whole thing.
Yep. This pod is full of women crying and eating dinner. I don't know.
Dinner. Yeah, I don't eat breakfast. Can't eat it.
Yeah. This pod is full of women. Crying, reading letters. We're gonna do
This pod is
that.
full of women. Florence Pugh image.
Yes. Yes. This pod is full of Saoirse Ronan voice women.
I think I'm the only actual little woman on here.
That's true. We are big women, respectively. Tall women.
Yeah. Also, why did I say Florence Pugh? Jesus Christ.
I mean, look,
My brain is Pew Hive all the time.
Thank you for your service.
Yeah, so Soft Sounds from Another Planet, second studio album from Japanese Breakfast, and don't tell Jero, but this is the best one.
It is.
It absolutely
However,
is.
in a bit of respect to Jero, I feel like because with Japanese
It's a
Breakfast
very
and
different
with this
experience.
album in particular, like there's just I feel like narrative factors into it so much that kind of the most appropriate way to address this is to start not with the release of this album, but on April 1st, 2016, with the release of a little album called Psychopomp, which some people liked, I heard.
Oh yeah, I've heard words about it.
Yeah, I have heard word people enjoyed that record, particularly two people on this very podcast who were very early champions of it. And like it was kind of just, I guess, yeah, neither of you two were on the pod, but at the time it was very wild to see just this record that like kind of just dropped out of nowhere. Michelle Zauner thought it was going to be her last record. She had no intention for it to like really make any kind of splash. And then it just kind of took off and built momentum over the year until it really was sort of like got received as this locally sourced classic, and it got no critical buzz, so to speak of. It was really just people online loudly, vocally loving and adoring this record. It put Michelle Zauner from being like on the brink of retirement to a full touring musician, like bigger than she had ever been. And that was such a sort of felt like a once in a generation thing to see a record take off on that scale in that way. And I feel like going into Soft Sounds, there was this big question of like, well, like what's next? Like, there's no way you can repeat Psychopomp, because even though it's not my favorite Japanese Breakfast record, that record is incredible. And there's this anxiety of like, oh, is that kind of going to be it? Like, is there going to be a sophomore slump? Like, what is she going to do? And no one really knew. And then this record dropped, and at least in my estimation, this is a blasphemous opinion to other people on this podcast who you will listen to talk about Psychopomp for what I assume will be a 5-hour episode about a 25-minute album when they get to recording that. It really surpassed Psychopomp by leaps and bounds for me. This record is so incredible, and was in just kind of this miraculous way where, like, I don't know what your first listens to this record were like, but I just kind of couldn't believe how good it was. It was so much better than I had hoped in a way that I was not expecting at all. And I was just totally blindsided by it and fell in love with it right away. And I have written, if you all go and read my little Soft Sounds blurb on our Best of the Decade list, have talked about sort of what my initial listen, an initial sort of infatuation with that album was like. For you two, how did you come around to this record, and like how sort of has your relationship with it evolved over time?
So I guess for me, like the main thing was I did not get the Japanese breakfast hype in 2016. You know, I thought Psychopomp was okay. And then this one came out and I kind of liked it. And then I completely ignored it for the rest of the year of 2017 because I was off in my own world at that point. And then slowly over the years since, like, it's just opened up to me in a way that I feel is like really just amazing. Like, it has become one of my favorites of the last decade, just purely just with more time spent with it. All right,
Mhm.
Corinne?
Yeah, the first listen that I had to this, it was kind of like I was just in a very bad like place in my life, very bad like horrible relationship, and I listened to it like the kind of day it came out, and it was like I just went through every single emotion possible with this album. It's kind of like, like she wrote this album after her mom died, so she was obviously processing a lot of emotions, and I think I kind of did the same thing. Like she took me on that kind of ride with her, and as much as it hurt, I loved it in the end.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember this being sort of one of the most like vivid and hallucinogenic first lessons I've ever had. Because as the story goes, like I listened to this on the flight back from Pitchfork 2017, which like I was at a point in my life then where that festival weekend was kind of like I'd come out as trans earlier that year, and so that was the first time I was being myself around people who had like only ever known me as myself, and it was this very sort of powerful and transformative weekend in terms of like how I sort of perceived and related to my own womanhood. And so that was all very much at the front of my mind when I put this record on. And then it just felt like she was talking to me about things like thoughts that I had had, but did not know how to put into words and did not know how she was putting into words. And for me, it was this very seminal moment of like, oh, right, I relate to art by women because I am one. And it was like this really like heavens opening up experience. I was at such a sort of fraught place in my life then that, yeah, I just remember I was on a layover, just like walking around the Calgary airport, like crying to the last stretch of this record, which we'll get to. It just got to me so much. And yeah, so I think based off that, we had talked about beforehand. If any of you, I guess it maybe depends which edition of Soft Sounds you got. One of the things that really like stunned me about this record when I first like opened, the copy I had pre-ordered, is in the lyric booklet or the companion booklet. It comes with this like handwritten note that Michelle Zauner had written on, according to the copy of it I have here, February 12th, 2017. And this just kind of floored me, and I think is a good way to sort of ease into the content of this record, because it to me says so much about what this record is about and what makes this record so distinct in the way it sort of approaches that subject matter. So if I may, and the rest of you or you two, I will warn you, buckle up, because this is just an incredible piece of writing. So originally, this record was going to be titled Here Come the Tubular Bells. Tubular bells were made to sound like church bells. They're played by hitting grand tubes with a mallet. You can hear them at the end of the record and in the outro of Till Death. A lot of those songs are about marriage, and for a time, that title seemed funny and fitting to me because it felt inherently sarcastic, like hearing a finale guaranteed to end with a thud. 2.5 years ago, by the time this comes out, we threw a wedding in my parents' backyard. I tried on my dress for the first time in my mother's hospital room. She was dying of cancer, and for some reason, this felt like the right thing to do. Really go out with a bang. Do something happy to help distract us and make up for all the things that happen when a horrible disease enters your life. We planned the wedding in 3 weeks, just in time for her to see it. She went into a coma just days after the ceremony, and a week after that, she died. Oh, sorry, the letter cuts off. Over the course of this month, I recited both a wedding vow and a eulogy. Oh, yeah, okay, sorry. Over the course of this month, I recited both a wedding vow and a eulogy. I wore a new ring on my left hand, and soon after took the token of 32 years of my parents' marriage on my right. I wrote about this heavy hand before in Rugged Country. I wrote most of Psychopomp a few months after this in a cottage in the back of 5 acres of land in Eugene, Oregon. It felt like a small, quiet way to process. I had no intention of touring on it. or for anyone to pay any notice. I'd spent the years before in a band that never quite took off and finally decided to put away that ambition. Unexpectedly, with Psychopomp's release, I experienced some small success as an artist for the first time. I signed to a label as an artist I'd silently envied for years. I won a magazine contest. I traveled the world. I played quote unquote big rooms. I felt very empty. It felt comically sad that this came on the heels of a record I thought would be my last, and that the one person I'd always wanted to impress was gone. Between my new marriage and my work, it felt like the day should unfold in great celebration. I'd filled my life with things that brought me great joy and fulfillment, but they passed through a clouded lens of mourning. I spent most of last year with my head down. A lot of these songs are about trudging from day to day, being on the road away from someone you love, feeling shut off, trying to retrain the heart to endure, the body to push past trauma. I changed the title to Soft Sounds from Another Planet because I often found myself disassociating from reality and retreating into science fiction during this time. I became obsessed with the Mars One project and often envisioned myself as a robot or tree floating in space. I provoked emotional distance and tried to enter a sort of self-induced amnesia. I tried to live quietly and move forward and beyond. I tried to listen.
Damn.
Yeah. It's really gorgeous, and I think speaks to sort of what to me is like the integral quality of this album is that, and sort of what distinguishes Japanese Breakfast as a whole from like other similar projects is it really does feel like how that artifact feels. It feels like you're getting a letter from a friend, and I don't mean that in like a weird parasocial way, but just that Michelle Zauner is so precise and so loaded with intention in the way she writes that it maintains that sense of intimacy throughout everything she does, and it feels like this lovely artisanal, homegrown, intimate thing that now sort of improbably has become like a huge project. And I just think there's something really remarkable about that, and that is partly why this album stands out so much to me.
Yeah, in a way, like it feels like very much like even when it gets into that wider space of like some of the more gorgeous and uh I guess hard hitting instrumentals that hit here, like some of the stuff like on Soft Sounds and Diving Woman and Machinist specifically, those three, like some of those points that feel more general. It still feels like the work of someone who very much is like trying to come in there with specific intentions.
Yeah, I think there's just so much care taken in how she is expressing what she's trying to express, and that's a big, yeah, it really makes all these songs so impactful to me. And I think, again, it's maybe if we want to like boil down the key difference between this and Psychopomp, not to make this like a comparison episode or anything, but Psychopomp is very much a diary entry. It's very internal and withdrawn, and then Soft Sounds is very expansive and outward looking and is trying to deal with, I suppose,
It's like an encyclopedia.
It's taking the feelings that present themselves in Psychopomp and then is taking the extra step of trying to like situate them in the world. And it sort of deals with this question of like, how do you function as a person when you have all this pain? And that is, a theme
Psychopomp would, like you said, it would be the more of like the diary entry, and Soft Sounds from Another Planet, it's more just like, I'm going to therapy and I'm dealing with this right now.
Yeah, totally. So from that, I don't know how how yeah, as we talk about it more, I'm like, shit, how do I talk about this record? Because I feel like there's so
so it's much so important to us, so it's going to be hard.
Yeah,
I don't know what to do. I don't want to say.
I mean, we could just do like a little track by track. Just, I mean, I know that can get rote, but for ease of like structuring this, like at least like, okay, we are forced to talk about this one thing for this stretch of time. Otherwise, I feel like this is just gonna like devolve into
into my notes, which currently, like most of the tracks, just read me asking the question repeatedly, is this the greatest song of all time, as I get to the next track.
Yeah, which maybe let's talk about that. The fact that like
The
like
progression of this album.
It's a perfect
yeah,
album. There's
it
no
is a
bad
perfect
songs on it.
album. No, there's no bad second. Like
And
I was
yeah, like
stunned when I was re-listening to it.
she took
Like,
so much care writing this, and considering the fact that her entire band and production company is just all friends and her literal husband, I think that did a lot in helping, kind of put it in its place.
yeah, absolutely. And I think Psychopomp really like proved her as just this master of concise, really effective, really wide-ranging songwriting. Like you kind of forget that like In Heaven and The Woman That Loves You combined are like 4.5 minutes. And she really puts those skills to use here, but in a much different way. And I think like if we want to go track by track, Diving Woman, like I remember when that got announced, the concept of like a 6-minute Japanese breakfast song was just like mind-boggling, because she had so made her name off these very short songs and these very short demos and sketches, that I think that is partly, sort of the statement of intent for this album of like, no, we are like really branching out and going broad here. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh yeah,
when Philly
especially in the
bands start
sense
writing
like
6-minute long songs, it gets serious.
like
Yeah.
like it in a sense it gets like much wider in every form imaginable. Like not just the length of the overall song, but just the way it kind of like spirals out into infinity with the guitar lines, similar to like to make a comparison that Michelle herself here has made in an interview, like Desire Lines by Deer Hunter, if anyone's heard that, like the way the guitars just kind of go on in a way that feels like natural, but also you can't tell that it's just repeating in a way.
Yeah, and I remember reading this, like that references cited from an NPR track by track interview she did, which I think we had all like discovered that a couple weeks after the album came out. And when she cited Desire Lines in reference to Diving Woman, that was like the puzzle piece that sort of like really, I remember among the podcasts, like made us understand sort of what vocabulary that song was working with. And I think this is also a thing that is really worth talking about this record, is it is one of those things where it's to cite another favorite record of mine and Corinne's, it's like that Decibels feeling where it's like this thing is using tools that I am so familiar with, but I've never heard. It's like using the same words to speak a different language or something. Like I think part of what sets this album apart is it is so it clearly is birthed from Michelle's like encyclopedic knowledge of music and songwriting, and there's such a incredible range of influences on it that she is somehow able to weave into something cohesive. And just like the fact that you have an album with like machinist soft sounds and 12 steps on it is just like,
Insane.
yeah, really wild. And again, like such precise and thoughtful songwriting in terms of, oh yeah, no, this is the sound we're going to work with on this song, and these are the ends it's going to serve. Like also with Boyish, the way I don't know if you guys listened to the Song Exploder about that, but the fact that
Oh
Boyish is
yeah.
essentially a doo-wop song, and yet despite that being its genesis, like it just kind of sounds like nothing else, even though, those traces of genre and style that we know, like those touchstones are there in it. And yet there's not really a song like Boyish for a lot of reasons that I'm sure we will get into. Yeah, it's not just like great songwriting. It is careful songwriting and like knowledgeable
Yeah,
songwriting as
understanding
well.
of genre hallmarks, I guess, in a way.
Yeah, in a way that I don't know that like a lot of people, sort of mentioned in relation to the album. Very much around the time it came out. I actually remember, so because this album came out when we were all at Pitchfork, like AJ and Jeremiah, of course, were like listening to it in the Airbnb, and I wanted to stay away from it. I wanted to stay spoiler free because I wanted to, consume the whole thing. But they were making jokes about just like, yeah, so she's just like made a country album in the middle of this, like that run of, I guess soft sounds is mostly what they were thinking of. But yeah, the fact that it's all over the place in terms of genre, and yet all of it still sounds like soft sounds. And I think also the structure of this album is really smart. I was sort of when I was re-listening to it today, which was a funny thing to do because I do feel like I have this album memorized on some level, realizing just that, yeah, talk about a great way to structure and pace an album, that you have this amazing little like 3-act shape it takes, where you have sort of like, you know, your opening overture of Diving Woman, Roadhead, and Machinist, which are sort of like your big 3 punchy singles that all sort of branch out in different directions, and then like Planetary Ambience into the soft sounds through like Jimmy Fallon big run is kind of like that shit's getting real second act. And then starting with Body as a Blade, she brings us home with like maybe the most devastating closing run on like an album. I don't know how you
Yeah.
guys feel that.
Oh no, that hurts. It all hurts so much. It's
It
kind of,
hurts
I don't
so
know.
much.
It's just like talking to a friend, and you know, you haven't seen each other in a second, so you're like, "Oh, okay. Here's how it's been. Here's how I feel inside. I'm dying." And
Right. Yeah, I will be honest, like when I listen to this album casually now, I broke this rule for today because I figured it was important to get the full album, but I stop it after Body is a Blade. Like
Yeah, you gotta.
those last, 2 proper songs. Yeah. Again, talk about it being tough to talk about. It's like,
yeah, I'll talk about
fuck.
my experiences with these songs later because it's
Yeah.
messy.
Yeah, so messy. uh and then so I remember like really the point where I thought, oh shit, this album is gonna be incredible, was like when Roadhead started, which just felt being like dunked into like a sparkling pool of water. I don't think I had ever, and I've really never heard a song like Roadhead since. There's so much magic in that song, from the guitar riff to all the production details. And like, I think it was like my 30th listen to the song before I finally noticed, again, talk about songwriting, like the moment when that bass line comes in under the chorus, it's such an intricately woven package. And I think is also really emblematic of uh, what is happening lyrically on this album that is very special to me. Like, how is a line like last ditch desperate like a makeshift siphon just condenses all of the sensation of experiencing misogyny into like a single line. Like the way Roadhead evokes that trauma and the sense of like disposability and worthlessness sort of mixed with this, internalized ambition that really gets brought out in the second verse, in the second half of the song. Like it conveys this feeling of being so small within this world that really kind of doesn't want you to flourish. And the song just sort of leaves you to linger in the hopelessness of that in a way that is so profound. And like, to me, Roadhead is, I'm just like, oh yeah, this is what being a woman feels like in the world. It's all here in this song.
Yeah, I'm
Very
reading the
true.
Genius annotations, and she said in an interview with NPR that she wanted to describe that really ugly moment when you try to do something sexually wild to save a relationship, only to make it more painfully apparent that it's not going to work. This is just like, oh wow, that hurt. That's me. I've been there. And God, like this, like Roadhead, it just makes you feel so warm, but it's also just really disgustingly cold.
True. God.
Yeah, because it's like,
Yeah.
it's like you're just talking. Yeah, like I said, like it's a conversation between, two women, and pretty much, and like you're talking about things, and you're like, oh yeah, we've both been there. That's an awkward thing. It's like something personal, but everybody's experienced it at the same time. And the whole misogyny thing, I didn't really put two and two together about that until now. So it's like, oh, okay.
Like, oh, that hurts.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think we'll get into it with other songs, but I think, oh yeah, this album deals so cleverly in, yeah, those feelings of sort of disposability and worthlessness and inferiority that sort of patriarchy and misogyny impose on us. It speaks to them really, really cleverly. And yeah, going back to the frankness, like I think that also, because I knew Roadhead was a single, but I hadn't, again, I'd like tried to stay away from it. And the fact that, yeah, the first line of the song is just, you gave Roadhead on a turnpike exit, that was like a moment where it's like, oh, is this allowed? Are you just allowed to like say that happened? Is that legal? Can you open your very pretty pop song like that?
You
It's
can.
yeah, you can, and you can make it like the greatest song of all time, apparently.
The greatest song of all time too, out of 12. So
Yeah,
I,
yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
we can call the two interludes the half greatest songs of all time if we want
yeah,
to. If we don't want to give full credit.
Yeah,
the
the 10
halftime
proper
greatest
tracks are
songs.
tied for 1, and then the instrumentals are like, 1.5 or whatever.
Like we'll allow it.
We will
Seems fair.
allow it. And then Machinist,
Oh
it's just
Lord.
like the little like S curve this album pulls going
She
between
just
these
starts
three
telling
songs.
stories.
Yeah, and Machinist was interesting because I think I'd been a little misled. I hadn't followed the press for that album this closely, but it was getting reported in like the early stages of its production. And she mentioned this in a couple of the NPR interviews that this was, and in the letter that this was going to be like her big concept album about space. And it was just kind of this thing of like, oh my God, she opens with like a concept album about death and then moves immediately to like a sci-fi opera. And then I guess, I don't know where I read this, but it's kind of inferred that that slowly got sort of scrapped as the idea ran out of steam. But Machinist is sort of the strongest remnant of that. And I do remember hearing that as like the lead single. And again, it just being so disorienting that she had gone from like the very sort of earnest stylings of Psychopomp into like this
Oh yeah,
space
we're in
banger.
space now.
Yeah, this jazzy space banger about a one-sided relationship. uh, like that's again the incredible like storytelling and lyricism on this album. The fact that Machinist is about like falling in love with a robot who can't love you back because they're a robot. And that it totally works. I remember like when we all saw her at Pitchfork, which I think for a lot of us was our first
We
time
were there.
seeing
We
her.
were there.
We
Yep.
were there, can confirm. Like the fact that Machinist had turned into this like unanimous, just like banger of the weekend, I think is so funny when you start to really break down what a bizarre, like chintzy 80s throwback this song is, and the fact that it works so well in spite of that, and like the lofty lyrical concept. Again, it's these things that like really only Michelle Zauner can do.
Yeah, like simultaneously like, oh, it's the perfect thing, but then it also feels like an accident whenever it happens in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's to her credit that like a lot of her music feels incidental by virtue of how carefully thought out and planned it is. And I wonder maybe also because something I don't think we've mentioned yet is that a lot of these songs came from really like early demos and sketches from like American Sound and the June tape. There are traces of a lot of these songs on there, so I think for her to take these
Kind of
sort of very off the cuff sketches and then turn them into these grand statements, yeah, it's just a very impressive thing. It's like this work of self adaptation almost, that it's like, right, that's the furthest I could take this idea, a few years ago, and now we're going to take it just like that much further.
yeah, a statement of like further intent. Like you had the idea, but now it's like mutated into something else entirely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she does like such a great job with kind of taking snippets. Like every day she just kind of like on the June tapes, she just really wrote, about the day, how she felt that day. And seeing her turn like diary entries into full on novels is kind of ridiculous. It's impressive and kind of terrifying.
Yeah, like we'll get to it later, but boyish, there's just like, like the first verse of the song or so. Or wait, no, I meant Roadhead.
Yeah,
My
take it
bad.
back.
Yeah.
uh
Yeah, like the first verse of the song and then just like a simple guitar loop on the original version of the song that you can hear, and it goes for 55 seconds.
yeah, and then Boyish, I mean, I think there might have even been less, if I recall correctly. It might just be the first verse of Boyish as well. It was
Oh yeah,
all that,
like
I think it's, what is it? Yeah, day 6. Yeah, and Boyish really, I think, is like a case study in sort of that whole self-adaptation concept, in that she took this demo, tried to do it with Little Big League, wasn't happy with it, and then, turned it into what we got on the album, which is just kind of this incredible thing. And I mean, okay, now we're jumping around, but Boyish,
Trauma
like
will do that to you.
trauma will do that to you. I am no, I'm not traumatized by all of these songs. All of these songs just speak to trauma that I already had, turns out. Whoops.
True.
But Boyish, I think, is like, even though it's not, I wouldn't say my personal favorite on the album, I think that's Roadhead, but that is also, you know, ranking like a 10.5 out of 10 to an 11 out of 10. But Boyish, I feel, is kind of just like one of the great songs of the 21st century in terms of being like a capital S song. Again, like everything we've been talking about so far, the structuring of it, the way it plays with genre, the storytelling of the verses, this like incredible iconic hook. I mean, I can't get you off my mind. I can't get you off in general.
God.
We're talking about lines that sort of distill like the essence of modern womanhood to their core. Like that's got to be up there in terms of just the
Yeah,
fucking
like
incredible gut punch of a line in another moment where you're like, is this legal for you to put this in a song? Can you
yeah.
do that? Can you say this bluntly?
She said it really good in Soft Sounds from Another Planet. So the first, I don't know, first part of the album, that's not the way to hurt me. I'll show you the way to hurt me. And then Boyish comes in. It's like, all right, bye.
Yeah. Oh boy. Speaking of all right bye moments, like this kind of, I remember having this very full circle moment with Soft Sounds because we talked about like I heard it for the first time at Pitchfork 2017 and then saw her live for the first time at Pitchfork 2018, which was like the 1 year anniversary of this record, more or less. And it was coming up on the end of that touring cycle for her. And so it was this interesting little like victory lap moment that to me really spoke of like to how, you know, Japanese Breakfast as a project had really like caught like wildfire, and especially over the course of that Soft Sounds year, which was like a huge breakout for her. Like I think a moment that really distilled that for me was one, the sense of like, and I remember Corinne, you and I had a couple of these moments over that weekend, like a Julian Baker too, of just like a song starting and being like, oh fuck.
Yeah, God.
And Boyish starting at Talia Hall was like maybe the biggest oh fuck of the weekend. And it's kind of
Yeah.
this, like when you think about it, this bizarre thing of like I can't think of many other songs where literally you just hear that like dun, 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 ka, and everyone is like, oh no, here it comes. Like just a chill erupted through the room, and I realized like, right, that is the song that like by and large struck the biggest nerve from this album, because
Like it's such a big song. We've all kind of been there, but it's also like I love this and it makes me smile, but I don't know if I'm in pain while listening to it, so I'm just going to listen to it anyways.
yeah, like that's sort of, and I mean this is I think a big part of this album's aesthetic as well, the fact that yeah, you have this like sunny doo-wop throwback, you know,
It's kind of
Yeah,
this like whole
lines
like
with a
crooner thing going on, and oh,
yeah, it's but like even more so, like since you mention it, like it has that like in case you didn't like pick up on it from the genre hallmark, like the runettes drums, you know, the that you mentioned, like that kind of beat, like adapted from sort of genre tropes like that, like girl groups and things like that.
mm-hmm.
Yeah.
the way
Yeah.
that like the chimes go into the chorus, and it's like, oh, here we go again kind of feeling. It's just I really don't know how you convey that emotion in any other way other than those stupid little chimes coming
Yeah, and
over and over.
the sense of like unresolved longing that comes from it. Again, this is a song that like conveys that inferiority complex that is drilled into all women at birth like so well.
Oh,
Like
she's yearning.
oh, yeah, heavy yearn on this
Yearning.
one. And that you have that moment of like, you know, as my ugly mouth kept running, love me, and leading from that into like this soaring, gorgeous guitar solo that I think I remember. So when I was making like Instagram clips for my own Best of the Decade list, I like needle dropped the song right when this guitar solo started on YouTube and like
Ooh.
started crying immediately just from like the beginning of the solo, because it is such an incredible like grand sweeping moment.
It's just like every time I put on this album, I'm just like, yeah, I'm ready to sit down with this, and then just like halfway through, I'm like, this is gonna fucking kill me again, isn't it?
Yeah, I want you and you want something more beautiful. Like all the one, like every single line
It's
as a
just,
standalone for Boyish. Is
Yeah,
just
like I think Michelle's greatest hallmark as like a writer is she's very economical with like a lot of her lines, and she just has a way of like hitting you just where it hurts, like so specifically.
and I think a big part of that and kind of the tightrope she walks really, really cleverly on this album is that I think a lot of previous albums, not that I can cite specific examples necessarily, but speaking generally, like I think when albums deal with this kind of subject matter, they can very easily get pigeonholed into sort of this uh, thing of just like being the victim or coming off as desperate or whatever, or coming off as like without agency. And this album avoids all of those things really, really well, to the point where like in Boyish, like that's a song where you feel sympathy for the speaker, but the speaker isn't exactly like being a good person either. Like I love that she does not shy away from the fact that like the speakers in her songs are well capable of being like petty and irresponsible and selfish, and like 12 Steps is a really great example of that too. That just she is able, and not many artists are really able to do this. All of her songs, it's just, this is a very reductive way to put it, but it is like so human. She captures the full three-dimensionality of like what it is to be a person through these songs. The fact that Diving Woman like sort of straddles this line between like wanting to be a homemaker and a wife, and then also wanting to be like very self-possessed and independent and ambitious, and it doesn't straddle either of those lines in a way that feels trite or
Reductive.
condescending or reductive. Yeah. It's really, it feels so organic that you don't really think about it when you're listening to the album. But I think in lesser hands, so many of these songs lyrically would have come off really, really clumsily. I think like it is difficult to make this stuff hit in the way that she was able to make it hit. And again, it's just another thing that like blows me away about this album so much, is just the roundedness and the complexity she is able to convey through relatively concise lyrics. This is not a rambling album, and yet every verse and every line feels like a full psychological meal that you're getting.
Yeah, having been on the last podcast, it's kind of weird because we were looking at Barry Johnson from Joyce Manor's writing, and it's all kind of the same. Like they're both really good at making these kind of like statements that are just so concise, and also Hi Rose's Dinner. Uh, there's a lot of like really just concise, but also like perfectly like I don't know harmful statements because you're not really like they're not really being the best person they can be, but they're not trying to complain either. It's just the way of storytelling. It's I don't know, it just does something.
Yeah, I think it's that sort of balance between like concision and bluntness, and that the bluntness doesn't belie the complexity of these sentiments. It maybe even amplifies them. And yeah, it's one of those things where a lot of the time she's just able to hold two perspectives in her hand at once within like a single line of this song. And like I like the chorus of 12 Steps a lot for that, because I don't know like how you are able to convey this sentiment without coming off like a garbage person, but she manages to, and like is able to just express this thing of like, yeah, this relationship has run its course and I'm gonna like go move on to something else. Like
Yeah,
it's
like
very
the
hard
admission
to
she
sound
has
likable
is
while you're saying
wonderful.
basically like, sorry, like that other guy's better. um and yet somehow she does, because I think also it's a thing where all of us have been there, and it's like an ugly sentiment to feel within yourself, that you're sort of being drawn out of that situation, or that the person you're with no longer appeals to you anymore or whatever. Which like even then, me saying that now, that's like a horrible thing to express, but somehow when she does it on 12 Steps, you're like, oh yeah,
It
I get
feels
it, I've
reasonable.
been
Like
there.
you're like, well, she has to.
Yeah, yeah, didn't know half of me was missing, it's easy to leave. Like
God.
boy, this album's good. It's real
It's
good.
all good.
When you put it that way.
Yeah, that is in conclusion, album good.
All right, we're done here. No.
Yeah.
Yeah, we can skip the next few. I think we're hitting a scary point.
Oh, believe me, my emotional well-being would love for us to skip the next few. It's funny. I don't know if someone mentioned this before or on air, but Jimmy Fallon Big being kind of like an overlooked song on this record. This
Oh, yes.
or one of
Yeah,
like
this discussion wasn't on air.
okay, yeah. So just the idea of that like maybe being one of the dips initially, and I always kind of felt that way too because it is essentially like a protracted interlude in a sense. uh this album did not hit for me until I had an experience like this, where I think, or this song, like Jimmy Fallon Big, I think is one of the best ever depictions of like a friendship breakup, which is a hard thing to depict because those are very nebulous and messy. And yet, again, it conveys the sentiment of like, yeah, this is not gonna work anymore. Like we can't be friends, and I feel sad about it, even though I'm angry at you and like wish I didn't have to make this choice, but this is the choice. That in like I'm looking at the lyrics here, in like not even 8 lines, basically, she is able to convey all the like mutual resentment and sorrow, and the sort of necessity and yet painfulness of this thing, so concisely and perfectly. Again, is one of those things where it's like, right, this is incredible art that you're able to condense these profound emotions into this little like bite-sized accessible form that is so sort of slight, it kind of passes you by without you really even thinking about it. And then, one day it hits you and you're like, oh, right, why don't you show up on time? Like, that's everything. That's the whole end of the friendship right there. Like, she manages to distill that stuff so well.
In just like 2 minutes, 30 seconds, perfect single length, by the way. The way like her vocals and how it's recorded, how it's produced, it all just sounds like she's screaming into the wind and like crying for something that she can't have. All of the entire album is yearning, but like I feel like it does hit you just one day you listen to Jimmy Fallon Big and you just go, oh shit. Because it just paints this beautiful but like also horrible picture of just loss and regret almost.
Yeah, totally. Like that feeling of, I wish it didn't come to this, but it has, and I can't avoid that fact any longer. Oh, you ever just make yourself sad talking out loud?
All the time.
Like
Oh
specifically
boy.
right now.
Yeah, specifically the last 42 minutes and 3 seconds. The vocals, too, Corinne, you mentioned, like, this is a thing that hit me even in one of my listens today. Like, I think it was the first time I'd kind of intently listened to Boyish since the Song Exploder for that song dropped. And yeah, that juxtaposition of those like pleading vocals at the end, and then just this like gorgeous vocal harmony in the background that, when you really like dial in and listen to that, there are like 50 layers of vocals happening, and it is this weird thing of like the person, in mourning or in grieving, next to this like Greek choir that almost like doesn't even seem to be hearing her. Like somehow it speaks to this feeling of being ignored and overlooked in this bizarre way, which is bizarre because again, you wouldn't expect that from like pretty gospel harmonies, and yet somehow she is able to, again, like we talked about earlier, like twist those familiar elements into this totally like unique and revelatory emotional end, and it just like never ever ceases to be impressive that someone like knows their craft so well that they are able to like twist it into those new forms.
Yeah, I'm also reading The Genius right now. I think Michelle just did an entire track by track breakdown for NPR.
She did,
And
yeah, I have that open here too.
oh Lord, ow, that hurts. So wow. Yeah, the context behind this is that she wrote Jimmy Fallon Big about her former bass player of Little Big League saying that their band was going to be Jimmy Fallon Big while hers implying that hers wasn't. And
Yeah, and now
how
current
weird.
bass player again.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah. I'm sad. I'm reading that snippet now, and I keep thinking that, like, they did play Jimmy Fallon big on Jimmy Fallon, because I feel like that is such a perfect like narrative endpoint for that song, but it still hasn't happened yet. If she plays Jimmy Fallon again when talk shows exist, I don't know when that's going to happen. Like, even if it's not for this album, it's like you got to play that song on that show. I
Yeah,
also would love to hear a live version of this, because I believe this is like the one song off Soft Sound she wasn't really playing on that tour.
Yeah, it doesn't get much rotation, it seems, on the set lists.
I think it's just
Yeah,
hard to recreate live since you have all of like those vocal tracks and harmonies going on.
yeah. Well, and that's why I think it would like play. Ironically, the way this song is constructed would play best in like a studio audience setting, because you would be able to like do all that stuff and have the production value sort of complement it. So yeah, I hope that happens. You hear that, Michelle Zauner? We're giving you notes. No, we are not. You're
Yeah,
very,
I
very
think it would be
talented.
good if you
Real.
took this direction for your career.
Well, talk about
She's gonna
direction
call
she's
us
taken
out
for her
publicly.
career. I'm still haunted by the concept of that "What would Randy Newman do?" tweet. Can't wait to figure out what that means.
Listen, I on the Randy Newman train, I'm all in. Woo!
Well, she also like I heard I saved some snippets of the third album she was playing on Instagram Live, and like she's done like some Cyndi Lauper shit too. It's
Good.
oh, that album's gonna be great when it happens in 5 years, when music
The
is allowed
horns.
to exist again.
Someday music will return.
Yeah.
Yes, we hope. So this at this point is me just fully procrastinating, talking about the closing run of this album. D- does anyone want to take this?
Um
So next up we have fucking hang on, let me pull it up just real quick. Oh, good lord.
feel
Yeah,
that.
Body is a
Mhm.
Blade. This shit right here. This song originally was on Where's My Great Big Feeling, but a different name is titled My Mommy is Sick. And it is fucking painful. Like, just trying to, like, build yourself back after immense pain in your life. If anyone wants to continue on here, because it's, like, still a lot.
I mean, I will say, like, as I mentioned previously, I was going through a lot of gender feels when this album came out, and I think just seeing that song title, I was like, oh no, oh
Oh,
no,
yeah,
I'm
like,
gonna have
the
feelings
thing
about
is,
this.
like, I didn't come out until like well after this was out, and like slowly that recontextualization of things like that for me was a big part of why it opened up.
Yeah, yeah, I felt like I got punched in the stomach, like reading the title of this song, and then punched in the stomach a bunch more listening to it.
It's
I'm
it
just
it
looking
just comes
over
from
it
such a
right
dark
now.
place that
Mm.
you don't want to relate to any of the feeling, but whenever you hear that kind of like the kick drum hits, it starts coming in, you hear the chorus, and Michelle Zauner is speaking to you directly and saying, this is how I feel, it's going to be okay. That is what kind of like, I don't know, it just brings the whole song together. I think the emotion that you get, like, the song isn't enough, you have to have this feeling inside of you, and coming out of that feeling and like knowing where you've been dealing with your trauma, it's kind of oof, owie. I can't even put it into words, it's just so hard.
Yeah, and I think also what is really impressive about this song, again, if we don't want to talk about lyrical precision, it's not trying to end on an uptick or anything or provide any consolation. Like, it is literally just saying like try and do your best, and try to manage, like, it doesn't try and tell you that like life gets better or easier or anything. It's just this idea that life will keep going whether you want it to or not. Like the idea of the body as a blade that
While your
cuts through all.
brain is writhing.
Yeah. And that whole motion of like cutting a path from day to day, it almost feels automatic in a way. It's like you are the like knife in the river, and the river is like flowing around you, but it's not a thing you control. It is just this like state that you are in, and remain in, and all you can do to manage that is just like try not to get too lost within yourself and try to find consolation where you can. But the song doesn't guarantee that that is going to necessarily happen either. It's this weird thing where the song is just saying like, yep, life happens no matter what, so stick with it.
Yeah, like
It's
that
gonna
lyric,
hurt,
find what's
stick with it.
left in you. That's what you
Yeah,
gotta do. Like, oh, from the darkest impulses of your heart, try your best to feel and receive. Your body is a blade that cuts a path from day to day. Just like, oh, that shit hurt.
yeah, just that
Just
idea of like try not to lose yourself and lose your connections to the like few things that do bring you comfort. Like that is basically all you can do in order to make life bearable, which is a profoundly depressing sentiment when I say it like that. But somehow this song manages to bring me so much comfort whenever I listen to it, because there's that thing of like, right, just it hurts, but keep going, and like maybe it won't hurt.
Yeah, it's just like getting a hug. It's like, all right. This song, like right now, I'm relating it to like, all right, this is about you talking to your homies online while you're stuck inside and can't see any of them.
Yeah, like some of these lyrics are really hit
They're
different
hidden
given
during
the
their
current situation.
isolation.
oh, good lord.
Yeah.
Ugh. and and then here we go into the last three tracks of the album, full on just gut punch after gut punch after gut punch,
Yeah,
and
it's
you're
just like this
dead.
album is just like, oh, here's the one that's gonna hurt you, and it gets worse.
Yeah, if Body as a Blade is giving you a hug, then like these next two songs are like pulling your hair and snapping your neck and then spitting on your face, like all in a row. Boy,
yeah, till
hard
death.
hurdy.
It hurts a lot, and kind of how it is right now. Well, I have a very personal experience with this song. So, my current partner and I, Soft Sounds was the very first song, was the very first full album that we listened to. I just, I didn't know it was going to turn into this, and we ended up listening to it on our first accidental date at like 2 a.m. And I think one day, like a lot of these songs, emotionally, they don't hit you until a certain time, and I think that has to go in with this entire album being about processing emotions and, just going through like the stages of grief, acceptance, like all of that. So, till death, it's kind of like she's come to terms with her mother's death, and she's going to have to come to terms with the fact that she and her partner will die. So, I think, I don't know, I just remember listening to this song on the drive home from my partner's house, and like Till Death started playing and the in my driveway. I just broke down full speed ahead sobbing in my car, and it's just like I've never had a love song be this kind of like difficult but also so relatable in a very long time.
Yeah, it's a pretty incredible portrait of just like a relationship, and more so than that, like a partnership and a marriage.
Yeah, it's all of like the beautiful parts but all of like the nasty parts that you have to confront at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's like saying like these things are in my life and I can't make them go away, but like you can help me with that in a way that nobody else really can.
Yeah, it's that thing of like we can help each other manage, and even if that seems small in the moment, that's also kind of everything. Like you need that balancing force that will like keep the ship upright to pull a line from the song. Is
And all of like the kind of self-deprecating talk, um like I don't deserve you but I'm giving it my best, that's like the perfect way to kind of describe a relationship where it gets serious.
Yeah, and I love that this album does, or this song, like, and I guess I can connecting it to like the thing this album accomplishes lyrically of just like not shying away from the, thorny, unpleasant parts of all these sentiments. Like the line that always kills me in this song is "Don't Turn Away, I'm Still Awake," because that is such a incredible distillation of like that desperate neediness you feel at times with like a partner who can balance you and round you out in this way. Like those, you know, sort of more unfavorable feelings don't necessarily disappear within a healthy relationship. It's just, it's again, it's another thing that you learn to sort of deal with and manage. But like, I think what this song acknowledges is there is still like that needy child within you at times that like requires this other person to sort of make the day feel bearable. And there's no point, you know, shying away from that or trying to like cover that up. It's just, it's part of long-term partnerships.
Yeah. And like even just music wise, like oh I can't.
Yeah, like the
Like,
way like those harmonies come in and the big key change towards the end, it's like just devastating.
like right in between chorus 2 and chorus 3, disgusting. That kind of just like
Oh,
explosion of emotions you get. You're like, even if you haven't felt, you know, this before, it's like that kind of like yearning in your soul knows what this feels like. And it's, I don't know, this shit just hurts. Like I keep saying that. It's like I'm talking so lovingly, and because this is literally one of the most amazing albums. It's like going to be my top 10 forever. Like this shit just
Mhm.
hurts. Like this album, it's toxic. It hurts me and I keep coming back to it.
pretty much.
Yeah, and I love the move in the third chorus of this too. Or actually, no, it happens a little bit in the second chorus, but you know, talking about the whole like thing of this album sort of just speaking to these like hidden unpleasant truths of womanhood in, you know, very direct ways. The fact that like at the end of this song, she just closes the song, the penultimate song on the record, by just like reciting a list of all her bullshit. Like it's like, nope, here's everything we're dealing with right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. Like it's like she lists all these things off and it's somehow just made into like the most beautiful thing you can imagine, but also just hurtful.
Yeah. And well, it's so vulnerable. Like it really is this kind of incredibly courageous move to just sort of expose those things about yourself. Like I am not even I would not be comfortable like listing off all the things that I'm dealing with right now that way, like in a song. And it's so earnest and so eloquently done that, yeah, it just, it really drives home the impact of the song to just completely pull the veil off. Like it's one thing to have a song of like, oh, you know, we're dealing with like difficult things or whatever, but for a song to be like, actually, you know what, here are the things, it really just ramps it up to like a whole other level.
I can't even imagine like just sitting down and writing this song. I would have just not written it, you know, like that
Hmm.
expression of just, you know, here is what I'm dealing with, just straight up. That's
Yeah,
powerful.
yeah, and like the line like, teach me to breathe, teach me to move. It's-
I think,
yeah.
yeah, that kind of goes in with
Fuck.
a lot of the previous songs. It's kind of like with Body as a Blade, it's like you're alone, but and then kind of until death, she puts it in another way. Like she steps out of herself and goes, it's like, well, maybe you're not alone, you know?
Yeah, it's again that thing of like, this is on some level such a unromantic love song in that it's about like, I don't
The
know,
nasty shit,
marriage.
yeah.
You keep each other from like disintegrating completely into all your pain and trauma, and yet she just spins it into this like gorgeous expression of, you know, love and devotion and care.
Yeah, just like all of the beautiful kind of, yeah, all of the beautiful music paired with just the like, I'm fucking dying, don't stop looking at me, please hug me, just talk to me. It's kind of like, oh, Yowie.
Yeah.
Oh, is it time? Is it time for this house?
I guess it is.
Yeah.
Oh.
This is the one I've been dreading talking about the most. I think specifically, like right now. Uh,
Yeah.
If you
And
want
every time I feel like I'm just like not prepared to discuss something like this.
if you don't want to hear three women unload, I think you can turn it off right now, but we
You know,
prefer
I
to
think they
not.
should have turned it off like a few minutes into this if they didn't want to hear that.
Yeah, but this is really like, the like we should have saved this for therapy zone of this episode.
Well, we can't go to therapy right now, so here
Yeah,
we
I
are.
got like 24 more hours before I got to call my therapist anyway.
Oh my god.
It's incredible closer, to the point that it is difficult to talk about. I this is gonna be a bummer, but because like I was thinking about this song a lot before we even like scheduled this episode, just over the past like 2 weeks. I don't know. It's been on my mind a lot, the way this song speaks to the sort of ephemeral and transient nature of friendships and connection, and that, you kind of just all you really have is like this, patchwork of moments with people, and that those patchworks don't always last either. I'm already starting to get belligerent. I think it's just the song really hits because like I am in a house like this right now, and since over the last 2 weeks I've become so dependent on it for like my survival and my emotional stability. The concept of moving on from that is like very, very scary to me, and I think the song is such a perfect distillation of the pain of like moving on in that way that just happens naturally. It kind of happens almost out of your control, and it's kind of the opposite of Jimmy Fallon Big, where that's a song about like a friendship going wrong for very specific reasons, where as this song is just about like, yeah, sometimes
It just goes away. It can
some
all be taken away.
yeah, sometimes it just goes away and things change, and that is just the nature of life, and there's no sense in sort of like fighting that or resisting that, because you can't. Like all you can do is be so grateful and present within like what you have currently, and just allow yourself to be within that for as long as it lasts. Because it probably won't, but like, the best you can do is just allow it to exist as is, and fully immerse yourself within it. Eh,
Yeah, that line that
yeah.
says "and where are you?" it could speak to a lot of things. It's like, where are you in personally, like inside right now, but where are all these other people? What are they doing? In a way, this song is kind of like reflecting on yourself, but also sondering kind of through the emotions and kind of like perspectives of other people. You know what I'm trying to
Hmm.
say? Yeah, because it's like, I don't know, the few other songs I've kind of felt this emotion that I share with this house would be "Stay Home" by American Football and "Heated Swimming Pool" by Joyce Manor. It's kind of just like, this is the end of the summer, and what are you doing? You're sitting in your house alone thinking about how shitty it was, or thinking about all the good things that, you missed out on, or that you felt, but you don't know if you're going to get that back. So it's just kind of like the whole reflection of trauma and relationships and how your life is going. It's like, what's it going to be like in another year, you know?
Yeah, like there's no guarantee to anything. She literally just asks, "What if one day you leave?" And it's like, what do you do at that point for
Yeah.
yourself?
And not even just leaving, like, the lines after that of, all confused desire and time zone changes change what's left of you and me. It's such an, again, that incredible sentiment of like drifting and organic change, that again, that is just like the nature of friendship and connection. That, yeah, it's it's hard to talk about, because I have had confused desire and time zone changes change what's left of you and me, like a lot of times before. And that line in particular just really makes me think of all that. And this has also been a thing that's been on my mind in the past couple weeks of like, you know those people that has happened to you with, like, they also are not going to be around forever. So like, just because things are transient, don't take that as an excuse to just like sit in your regret or your yearning. Like, it this is going to sound so trite, but it is just that thing of like, you have to maintain your link to these people while you're here, because once everyone's gone, there's nothing else. So I think without even trying to necessarily, the song just sort of it demands that of the listener, of almost like don't let this happen to the degree that it could. Like, try and hold on to these things as much as you can, because like that is the fundamental goodness and warmth that is going to, get you through all that trauma and loss and pain, and like, I don't know, maybe a pandemic.
No kidding.
When they ask where are you, I'm at home.
Yeah, right. What if one day you leave? Can't.
Not allowed.
Yeah, not a lot right now. Sorry.
Don't want to think about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Youch.
And that also builds to, I think, one of like the most iconically devastating final verses / lines of an album. I mean, like, these 4 lines, I'm looking at them right now. There's so much in them about all the things we've been talking about change and pain and loss and transience and survival. It's all there in those 4 lines. I can't think of a more perfect verse, honestly.
A statement of intent, I guess, like a way to really finish it off and show everything else that's been reflected on in this point.
Yeah, it really crystallizes everything the album has been dealing with in more broader terms until now. I think it's like so painful to think of the concept of like, I owe it to the timing of companions I survived the year at all. Like the fact that even your survival is something incidental that just sort of arises. Like, she doesn't even frame it as an accomplishment. It is just like
It
this
doesn't
bare
feel
minimum through
grateful.
happenstance that like you happen to still be here despite all this, and it doesn't even necessarily feel good.
It's just kind of like, what about it? I'm
Yeah, it
going to
just kind
be
of
here.
feels.
I
Yeah,
exist.
it's not a victory or anything.
No, it's just it's almost like marking like another notch in the wall. It's like, yep, this was another year and we're still alive, and I don't really know how or know what to make of it. But again, going back to like Body as a Blade, it's just like, well, we're still here, so I guess we just have to like keep going and treasure the things we can in the meantime.
Yeah, like the past 3 years that have gone by after this album's come out, like she says in this house, like, we're all different people now. I'm not the one that I was then. And like, what do I do with this information? Just like, you know I can't
Yeah,
even, it's hard.
yeah, and it's that thing of like people change and it hurts, and that is just the way it is. It's really, this album pulls no punches on that level. Like we mentioned earlier, it does not try and comfort you or anything, but it feels comforting by virtue of how earnest and sort of like on point it is. If this album accomplishes nothing else, it lets you. And again, this is a big part of why this album hit so hard for me initially. Is it's like, you're not the only person thinking and experiencing these things, and it sucks to have to, but like, you're not the only one. So make of that what you will, because whatever you do with that is like the thing that is going to help you sort of keep surviving, than the thing that is going to like keep you sane.
Yeah, like your survival and everyone around you's survival is sort of circumstantial upon each other.
Yeah, the kind of like underlying, I don't know, narrative of how fate can do things to you that's throughout this album, it's kind of like, it's just really painful. Like, it's always in the back of your mind. And then this house just kind of lays it all out on the table. in the most painful way possible.
Yeah.
And then whenever you put all of the questions in this house and apply it to kind of the rest of the album, it's like, oh God, yeah, where are all these people right now? What are they doing?
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought about it. Where's the other guy in 12 Steps? Like,
Yeah,
Yeah, like
what happened with him?
a
he's
sort
gone.
a meeting
Didn't
of
marry
chance, I
Michelle.
guess you could say, for a lot of these things. Like, like falling in love with a robot. That's a meeting of chance in some
Right.
sense. The concept.
Yeah, God, 12 Steps being an apology song, I still can't get over that. It's just like, hey, sorry I didn't marry you.
Yeah. Yeah, sorry, you like didn't happen to be my husband.
Yeah, you
Whoopsie
didn't
daisy.
suck. You were just kind of okay.
You were just like you're good. You just weren't the one. I'm like, the one is over there. So see ya.
I'm yeah, now it's like what are just going through Soft Sounds from Another Planet, you kind of you go through it and at the very end, you're sitting somewhere and you're just going, "Damn, is it really like this?" While Here Come the Tubular Bells plays quietly in the background. And it ends and
Yeah.
let's move on with my life.
Yeah, it gives you a second to just sit there and like decompress from it.
I also love that like this album, I feel like if Psychopomp sort of chronicled the source of the pain, Soft Sounds is not even necessarily trying to address healing or anything. Like what it builds to words to is just like emotion towards healing, never mind even like actually achieving it. Is just like, right, that is possible. And I always interpret Here Come the Tubular Bells as this sort of returning home. It's that first glimpse of light at the end of the tunnel after like 2 full albums worth of shit. It just sort of acts as this reminder, like, right, despite all of this and in the midst of all of this, it is still possible to feel joy and hope and feel a sense of resolve, even if at times the like magnitude of your pain feels completely unbearable. It will not
Yeah.
past, but just the idea that these things aren't forever and that it is possible, even if healing is just a perpetual journey in itself with no endpoint, it is still a thing worth embarking upon, and you will see the fruits of that labor at a certain point. And that's how I interpret 45 seconds of wedding bells at the end of an album.
Yeah, hearing the bells at the very end, it kind of just evokes this emotion. It's like when your mom has chimes in the background and you've been doing this loud activity or just something and you just take a second to step back and be like, "Oh, it's windy outside."
Yeah,
You
it's a
know?
breath in. And going back to that letter we read at the beginning, it sort of brings up the contrasting images of like that wedding day in the backyard. And then I don't even know what like it would mean for the bells to loop around after all that, but it feels like an echo of that in this interesting way. It's sort of rhyming it at the very end of the album.
Yeah, like, oh, yeah, it's like whenever she asks, "Where are you?" It's and then you listen to "Here Come the Tubular Bells." It's I'm right here.
Oh my God.
Oh, we
Fuck
keep
me.
doing, we keep talking about this. We're just gonna start crying.
Oh,
This is a cry sesh.
Yeah,
you
it
just
is.
actually made me start crying
Oh, this is
there.
the end of Midsummer. I'm so sorry. We're gonna burn a man down right now.
Oh, should we just end it there? I don't know if there is a better, like,
Better ending than crying? No.
not even crying. I just mean like that. Yeah, what Corinne just said, like, that's it. Oh, that's the note the album ends on.
I'm right
Oh,
here.
don't even say it again. That's gonna like, I'm like still on the edge with this.
To quote Cassia from the last episode, I can't believe I know this bitch.
Oh
It's the
boy.
album.
So in conclusion, album good.
Album good.
As we've been sort of harping on it, it's a really incredible achievement, and it was made that much more memorable to the point of really being kind of like a standout capital M moment of the decade for me, just to see the full arc from like psychopomp first dropping to like the post soft sounds victory lap of like, Michelle Zauner went from someone on the brink of quitting music entirely to one of the most like important
Loved.
and beloved artists in indie music. And there is also, I think, soft sounds. Why I ranked it at the top of my decade list in particular is because it sort of embodies everything that over the course of the decade I realized what I wanted rock music to be, and what now I'm very excited that rock music is becoming. In that this is like, this is a throwback album by like a queer Asian American woman that was like a massive cult hit. And that wouldn't have happened 10 years ago. That would not have happened if this album came out in 2007. And so for something like this to even exist, never mind be as celebrated and beloved as it is, makes me feel really hopeful about the future of music. And this is kind of like the album I am holding rock music to going forward. Of like, are you doing what Soft Sounds is doing? Like,
This is the
is that
standard now.
yeah, I think it
If you
really
do
kind
not
of stepped.
have at least 3 songs as devastating as the last 3, fucking scrap your album right now.
Yeah, it's kind of what I want the future of music to be, and I am so glad it exists as a baseline for that. And I'm realizing as I talk out loud, it makes me excited to hear what the albums written by people who grew up loving soft sounds are
Oh
going to get to
god.
sound like. It
Give
just,
me a
it gives me.
year.
Yeah, we're waiting on the album, Corinne.
Okay.
So
Sorry.
this album means a lot to me for all those reasons. I think it's one of the best albums of the decade. I think it's the best rock album of the decade. It is just a perfect album that I love, and is going to be, in my Alzheimer's list for the rest of my life.
Mm-hmm.
I love it.
Same. Ooh.
Yep. Hi.
It's just beautiful and devastating, and really just all the adjectives we have used up to this point. Like,
There's
good
only so
lord.
much words that you can kind of describe the album with, and one of them that's always going to show up is painful and traumatic.
Of course.
Yeah.
Ooh.
I've never met another perfect 37 minutes and 10 seconds of my entire life where it forced me to go through every single stage of grief, and, lots of crying while listening to it, every single time, it
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
hurt.
Like I've heard perfection, but not in this way, I guess.
Yeah, it dawned on me very slowly that this album was perfect. And it's one of those things where like you don't know when you're gonna encounter that next album that is like second for second perfect for you. But this is certainly one of them, and it appeared to me in a very unique, memorable way that just has given it that much more power and gravitas in my mind. That like soft sounds is up in my brain and like neon lights at all times, because it's just that good.
Yeah, even without the bias of me kind of relating to it, it's kind of like the Asian American woman experience. It's just like I've never, kind of had these emotions depicted in an album for me in a way that's kind of, relatable, easy for me to understand, but also kind of wondering like, who am I?
Yeah, for sure. It's one of those great accomplishments where the specificity of it only sort of enhances its resonance. Like, um, my mom is not dead. I am not a Korean American woman. I am bisexual. I'm new in town. But like, despite all those things, this album still speaks to me in a way that feels like, my own thoughts getting plucked out of my brain and inserted into a series of fantastic songs.
Is there really anything else we can say? Like,
I mean, even just like talking about this album right now, there's a lot of things that about it that I haven't realized or picked apart until now. Like I spent hours studying this album, just like listening to it, listening to all the harmonies, picking out different things that I haven't heard before. But talking about it, it's, like unloading the trauma that this album has put me through and like all the trauma that I relate to this album, not in a bad way. Just like, it opened up an entire new world.
Yeah, for sure. So that's the episode.
good shit.
I know it's heavy. It's
Yeah.
like the Crucible when they start killing that guy and he's just like put more weight on. That's what this album is. That's what this album is. Just 12 rocks on my chest.
I give it a 12 out of 10 rocks.
It's like Dudes Rock, but for women.
It is. It is a Saoirse Ronan voice woman, Dudes Rock voice, rock.
I think we can end it here. We're all just spiraling.
Yeah, we very audibly are. If you made it all the way through this, thank you for listening to an emotionally harrowing episode. You will, I assume, I don't know what our recording schedule is looking like, but hear the next album in our top 10 next week, probably. And I don't have the doc up, so I don't know what that is.
I can pull it up right now. Hang on.
Oh, perfect.
All right. So, yeah, Indieheads Podcast Decade Casts.
There it is.
After us will be yeah, after this is quite a pivot here. Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City with Jackson, Maddie, and Dill, hopefully, will be the solid lineup when that gets recorded. Oh, that's certainly a pivot from this one.
Yeah, so, go listen to that one, sit down, drink.
Have a good time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, what a hoot that is going to be. I don't know. Stay safe, stay inside. Roadhead is the greatest song of all time.
Every song on this album is the greatest song of all time. And
Yep.
It's a valid
Peace out.
counterpoint.
Bye. We love you.
We hope you're okay.